Good morning, sports fans, and welcome to another edition of the PR Man and the Coach Talking Ball on the BallFather podcast, presented by Sportskeeda. I'm Reggie Roberts, your host of the BallFather podcast, and I'm joined by my co-host, Mike Smith, winningest coach in Falcons history. Coach, hey man, how you doing this morning?
I'm good, Reg. I enjoyed those ball games yesterday. There's two cities that are real happy, two cities that are bummed, man. Fan base.
You know, it happens every year. I mean, every year you have two fan bases that are really thrilled. And as matter of fact, I talked to Ike Reese, who played for the Falcons for 2 years, and he's a radio man at WIP in Philadelphia. He said the party was raging on down Broad Street very strongly last night in Philadelphia, and he said but the city was ready for it and had everybody cleared out by 9:30, and it was good. I tell you, go ahead.
Well, I heard they had the light pole. So can you imagine what they're going to have to do if the Eagles win in 2 weeks?
I tell you what, it's been the year of Philly. I mean, the Phillies go to the World Series. They didn't win, but they were there. The MLS team got to the MLS Cup, and they showed up really good, but they didn't win. And now, the Sixers are 20-4 in their last 24 games. And how about the Eagles? How about them Eagles going back to the Super Bowl for the second time in 6 years? And, I think the league has to be very, very pleased from the perspective that I think the two best teams in the league, pound for pound, got to the final game. I really believe that.
I believe it as well. Now, there were some bumps in the roads yesterday with some of the officiating and some of the calls that probably made the league feel cringe a little bit, but that happens. It's a human game. People are going to make mistakes.
It's funny on Twitter. There was a lot of conversation on Twitter and of the social media about how bad the officiating was. Mike, you spent a lot of time in the league as a head coach, and you're on the phone and you are on various committees. Post head coaching career. Do you think it's time? And I know we're going off script here a little bit, but do you think it's time for the league to consider full-time officials, or what's your thought on that? What's your thought on that?
I'd say yes, wholeheartedly. I think you can't do this as a part-time job. There's so many different dynamics that are going on, not only on game day, but rule changes and ways to get better. We as a league, we try to get better. We have off-season programs, but we're not like officials. We don't have second jobs. There are some full-time officials with the NFL right now. There's a handful that work for the league, but I think it would be a whole lot better if we went to full-time officials, and I think it would help the pipeline and allow more people to be evaluated to become officials in the future, because it's a dying profession, starting at the little leagues and midget football and the youth leagues. Nobody wants to be an official, and high schools are having to cancel games because they don't have officials, or they're playing on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday nights. Not because there's no stadiums, it's because they don't have any officials. It's a real problem in football, and just not in the NFL. And I think the NFL should take the lead and try to help alleviate the problem at all levels.
That's an interesting take. I hadn't heard that they're having to cancel games. I hadn't heard that. I guess is it because of the parents, or they just it's a dying profession because people don't want to do it? The pay's bad. What do you think?
Well, I think it's a little bit of everything. And the first thing that you mentioned is the parents and the verbal abuse that they have to take for the pay that they're doing. And a lot of them don't get paid a whole lot at the high school level. And of course, when you start talking about the youth level, most of the time those are volunteers, right, or they're getting paid very, very little. And it's something that I think needs to be looked at. I know that the NFL could take the lead on that and help it out through not just the NFL, but through college football, high school football, and youth football. We got to work on the pipeline.
Well, I'm sure the league's going to take into consideration, because the league doesn't like criticism. I'm sure Roger Goodell and his staff will be looking at this, between the 2 weeks, because I'm certain he'll be asked about it during his commissioner's address, his State of the NFL address the Friday before the game. So I'm sure they'll be working on it and have an answer for all the media who'll be there assembled to listen to him. But let's talk about these games. Let's talk about the AFC game first. Great game, nail biter. Joe Burrow showed that he's a great quarterback. But I tell you what, Pat Mahomes playing on one leg, and to fight through that and to make a play late in the game, when they needed a first down, he got aided by the gentleman, by the linebacker defensive end who knocked him out of bounds. I'll get to a little bit some thoughts I had on that later with the vitriol that's coming at this young man based on fans about the guy made a mistake, but we'll get to that in a little bit. But talk about Pat Mahomes, Coach Smith, as far as how tough he is, how smart he is, and how he willed his team to the Super Bowl this year.
Yeah, I mean, Patrick Mahomes is probably one of the top 3 quarterbacks in the league right now. I don't think there's any doubt what he was able to do on an injured leg, coming back from 1 week from having a high ankle sprain, just amazed me. He moved a lot better than I thought he was going to be able to, but he was probably only about 75-80%.
Yep.
And he is one of the most competitive guys that I've ever seen. He's a great leader. You could see it on the sideline. He was keeping the guys engaged in the ball game. And when he had to make a play, he made a play. And he's got some playmakers on both sides of the ball. And the 2 best teams are playing in the Super Bowl, as you mentioned earlier. But you can't go to the Super Bowl anymore without a top-level quarterback. And I think we're going to talk about the quarterbacks in this league a little bit more in depth here later on in the show. But you got to have that guy that's pulling the trigger, and he's done it. And he and the other quarterback, Jalen Hurts, they're probably the 2 favorites for the MVP. They're battling on Super Bowl Sunday, and they'll be battling Saturday night or Friday night when they announce who the MVP is going to be.
It's exciting. It's exciting. You mentioned a really good point. Those 2 guys are 2 of the finalists for the MVP award, and they're battling. They'll be doing battle. They both played it. They're both from Texas, and it's part of one of the storylines. They're the first 2 African American quarterbacks to start the Super Bowl, which has gotten a lot of traction. But let me ask you this: the one thing that's kind of interesting that I thought Coach Reed and his offensive staff, Coach B&M and the rest of those guys, put a pretty good plan in place early to sort of protect Patrick, to keep him from running. I thought the quick pass game was very effective early.
No, absolutely. They were on point. They do a great job of putting a script together of how they're going to start the game. And I think that was probably the difference in the ball game, is the way that they started, because on the other side of the ball, the Bengals really struggled protecting their quarterback.
Right.
It was tough. And probably the difference in the football game was the sacks. The Eagles were able to get to him early. They had to make some adjustments, which didn't allow them to get all 5 guys out into the route. They had to do some things with their protection and make adjustments. And I think it hindered them, and it had Joe Burrow going. But Coach Reed and his staff, they had a great plan, and they executed it.
Yeah, defensively, the Chiefs moved him off the spot. They had 5 sacks, 12 quarterback hits, picked Burrow off twice. I mean, that defense was swarming, limited the Bengals to 6 of 14 on 3rd down. And I felt like they sped him up a little bit, Coach. I really felt like they sped him up a little bit.
Oh, I think they did. I think they had him back on his heels early on. But I will say this: when you're playing in an NFC Championship game, you've got probably the 2 best staffs in the NFC going against each other, and on the AFC side. And when that happens, you're going to see adjustments, and you saw that in that ball game. You saw the adjustments that the Bengals were able to make. And their protections, and they were able to get back into the ball game and make it close. And they protected Burrow well after giving up those early shots, and they took some body shots because their quarterback was getting hit.
Yeah, he was getting hit. Mahomes again. On the one leg, he makes a play. The guy, the poor defensive end, the young man from University of Texas, second-year player from University of Texas, hits the guy. late. I know it's a hustle play, and he was going 100 miles an hour trying to make a play. Mike, how do you coach that guy? How do you console that guy after he makes such a critical error that everybody's saying cost him a game? But there are other plays. There are other plays in the game that sort of limited why they didn't win. How do you coach a guy and get him back from?
Well, I think Coach Taylor did a great job in his comments after the ball game. There's not just one play in the game that is the determining factor, and you can't say they lost the game because of that play. There were other opportunities throughout the game that presented themselves that if the Bengals would have made, they would have won the game. It's just a shame because the kid was having a great game.
Right.
He's second-year player, really developing into a very good defensive end. And Reg, you've been on a sideline in a game, and you're amped up. The players are amped up. The situation was about as biggest pressure cooker that you could be in, and probably for him it was the biggest he's ever been in up to this point in his life. And he's just over aggressive, and you can't blame one person. There's 75 plays in a game. There's 22 guys going at it. There's a lot of complexities. You could throw in the officiating. You can throw in all kinds of things that would have made a difference in that ball game. So it's tough, and unfortunately, when you look at social media and the things that happen now, that's just part of our world, and you can't say one play or one person cost us the ball game.
Right.
There's no doubt about it, and I loved what Coach Taylor said after the ball game. Chiefs. All you can do is console the young man, and he's not going to feel good about it for a long time. But we won't remember that in 6 months. That won't be what we'll be talking about. There'll be so many other things, and he's going to have a long, great career, I'm sure.
Yeah, Mahomes reached Super Bowl 3 times in his 5 years. First 5 years as starter, 2019, 2020, and 22. So, they get there. They qualify for the AFC. Switching over to the NFC game, I tell you what now, that game, I thought that game, had a chance to be really, really, to be just as close as the AFC game. And it looked like early. It looked like, San Francisco kind of started out, they were throwing the ball, pretty trying to get a rhythm. 6th play of the game, the whole dynamic of the game changes with the sack, and then the injury to Purdy's elbow. What were your thoughts leading to that game? Give me your thoughts on what happened with that play and what it did to San Francisco's chances, Coach.
I feel for the San Francisco 49ers. How many seasons can a playoff team have the injury bug like they've had at the quarterback position? The 4th time.
Wow. And
it was, this is almost an impossible situation, having to play with a career backup, Josh Johnson coming in there, and then he gets injured. And you got to put in the quarterback that got injured before. He's got to go back in the game. And, Purdy's had a great season. It's been a great story. He won 8 games in a row to lead them, to leave the game with that injury and then get forced to return. I've got to say this, Reg, I think we need to have the emergency quarterback come back. And we'll talk about that a little bit later, because once Purdy went out, there was no chance. And for them to have to play in a championship game and only attempt 2 passes in the second half, after Johnson went down with the concussion and was put into the concussion protocol, that's just not right. That we can't do that. For teams to fight and then just have no chance of winning when you lose both your quarterbacks and you only got 2 on your roster.
You're with the PR man, the coach talking ball on the BallFather podcast presented by Sportskeeda. Mike, for those listeners and our viewers who aren't familiar with the emergency quarterback, could you sort of, and shed some light on what that rule looks like and what it means?
Yeah, between I think it was 1990 to I don't know, maybe 2010. they had a
Yeah.
little different situation. We had 45-man game day rosters. Now we have 46-man game day rosters. But when you had the emergency quarterback, what it allowed you to do is it allowed you to dress a third quarterback.
Right.
And he was the 46th player. And what would happen if he entered the game in the first three quarters, the starter and the back weren't eligible to come back in. So
Right.
he was only going to be used in emergency situations. After they abolished that rule, I think it was in 210, that's when they added one player to the roster. And most teams have gone with two quarterbacks. You might go with three quarterbacks on your active Sunday or game day roster if both quarterbacks are a little bit banged up. But for the most part, teams don't dress three quarterbacks. We had to have an emergency plan, and what you got to have going on there is you got to have a player. Maybe it's a guy that played in high school as a quarterback.
Right.
And if both guys go down, you're just going to have to hand the ball off and make it an ugly game. And really, that was an ugly game yesterday.
It was.
For the fans, it really was. And you don't want to have ugly games and being decided by an injury to two, at one position to two players. And I hope that the competition committee will take a good hard look at maybe tweaking the rule, but allowing. I thought it worked well when you had that third quarterback, because then you knew you were going to be able to finish a game and have some semblance of a football game, and especially in the NFC Championship. And I felt like there was no doubt that game was over once they had to bring back, the starting quarterback who had a wrist that couldn't throw the football.
Couldn't throw it.
It looked like, unfortunately, I hate to say this, but it looked like, a young team. When I say young team, midget football, where they don't have a quarterback that can throw. And there's no way in hell that the 49ers are going to be able to win that game.
Right.
With a quarterback that had an arm injury or wrist injury.
Right.
And only completed 2 passes for 4 yards when he returned to the game. Just not right.
It looked bad. I mean, these are the championship games that decide which teams go to the Super Bowl. These are signature events for the NFL, and you're right. I mean, the fact that they only threw 2 passes in the second half, and the guy came off the field and said, "Hey, coach, I can only throw the ball 5 yards, 10 yards." I mean, you're right. I mean, that's that. If they didn't make a case yesterday for the emergency quarterback, I don't know what is. I mean, that's a prime example that when they present it to the competition committee, I mean, that's a prime example of this is why you need it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can imagine what the TV ratings were in the second half of that ball game, except for in Philadelphia and San Francisco. And that might make the league want to take a good look at that as well. And especially maybe if you just do it in the playoffs. Maybe have it just where it's in the playoffs, not during the regular season. And it doesn't happen very often, but when it happens, it's a bad look.
Yeah.
But you got to say kudos to the Philadelphia Eagles. That front that we talked about last week with the third most sacks in the history of the NFL. It's amazing to watch them get started. Now, they didn't get a chance to rush it, but they affected the ball game all day. And I think that moving forward, that's going to be an interesting thing.
Mike, they got a bunch of dogs on that offensive line, on that defensive line. They got after that guy. They finished the regular season with 70 sacks, which obviously was a club record for them. And now they've had 8 in the postseason. I mean, that the guy Reddick, that Hassan Reddick, oh my gosh, he comes out.
Yeah, he was on fire. They couldn't block him yesterday.
Oh Lord,
they could not block him.
Mike, wait, you trying to block Hassan Reddick, who had 16 and a half sacks, with a tight end? What are they doing? What are they doing?
Yeah, well, they were trying to max protect, and they just had a mismatch, and they needed to double him. They needed to try to block him with the tackle, tight end, and maybe a running back. because it wasn't working. If he wasn't sacking the quarterback, he was affecting him. And it would have been really bad, Reg, if they were really throwing the ball.
Yeah.
At times, and I felt like Coach Shanahan was completely handcuffed because he couldn't throw the football. And you got to, hey, you're playing in the NFC Championship game, and you can't throw it. And guess what? This is a throwing league. This isn't the 1960s where you have 19 passing attempts in a game and 50 running attempts. That's not what it is. It's not ground and pound, man. This is a quarterback-driven league. Yeah. You got to protect that quarterback, and they had no chance. I felt bad for Coach Shanahan and his staff.
Yeah, it was
kudos to the Eagles, to the victors.
Yeah.
And kudos to the Kansas City Chiefs. And in 2 weeks, there'll be so much information out about the 53 men that are playing in this game, their families. It's a great time. It's a great celebration. People talk about the World Cup and the parties that go on, but there's no bigger party than Super Bowl Sunday in the United States and in the world. There's so many people watching this game.
Right. The information, 110 million people worldwide. The information, it'll be information overload with regards, because like I said, as we said at the beginning of the podcast, I do believe that these pound for pound are the two best teams in the league from the start of the preseason to right now. I think there's going to be some amazing storylines. How does Kansas City's offensive line, which is really good, how do they match up with Philadelphia's defensive line? There's some injury situation. Mahomes, how does he use the 2 weeks to heal up his high ankle sprain ankle, and then juxtapose that to Jalen Hurts, who wasn't 100% either with his throwing shoulder. So there's going to be a lot of storylines going forward, and I think it's going to be a tremendous game. I really do think it's going to be a tremendous game.
It is, and you got to worry a little bit about the wide receiver position for the Kansas City Chiefs. They lost a couple more yesterday.
Yeah.
That Scanling yesterday, what a game he had. And then you got Kelsey. So he still has some weapons. And the two running backs, they're deep. When you try to compare these two teams, when people start really digging in and looking at these two teams, it's going to be close. I don't know what the point spread is when it first came out last night, but I imagine it's going to be pretty tight.
It was even when it first started, but I think it's now Eagles +2.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, Eagles that's going to change, and that's going to change based on how much money comes in for what team. And I imagine the storyline early is going to be the wide receiver injuries, and that'll be something that we'll be able to talk about next week in our first pregame show of the year at for the Super Bowl on our weekly podcast. Be fun, Reg.
You're looking forward to it. You're on with the PR man, the coach talking ball on the BallFather podcast presented by Sportskeeda. Mike, you know what? At this time of year, there's two teams who actually, as we talked about, there's two fan bases who are bumming today. There's two that are really, really excited. And then the rest of the league is sort of trying to, they're in planning mode, getting ready for the 2023-24 season. And without question, the most important person on every roster is the quarterback. So let's kind of go. You've put together a really, really cool chart here that sort of talks about, what quarterbacks are out there, who's available. We got all these different categories. Why don't you just kind of take us through and run down who these quarterbacks are, and talk a little bit about what team needs and who can do what for each team.
Yeah, well, I know a lot of people, Reg, are going to be talking about the Super Bowl over the next 2 weeks, but there's going to be discussions about the next most important discussion during the off season, and that's the quarterback carousel. People don't realize how much effort is going to be given to quarterbacks. Not only quarterbacks that are playing in the league right now, but the quarterbacks that are going to be coming out in the draft. This is a quarterback-driven league. Unfortunately for the other 52 players on the roster, that quarterback, he's always going to be the highest paid player on your team if you got a good one. And so I try to take a look at what was going on through this season, and this is also takes into account what's happened in the last 2 or 3 seasons. And I think there's only about 9 teams that really feel good about their quarterback situation long term. Now you're going to say only 9 teams feel good about your quarterback situation. Let's take a look at it. I've got 5 guys that I think are elite right now that are playing in the National Football League. And when I say elite, that means every team in the league would want this player on their team, no matter what. And that's 2 of the guys that are playing in the game this week: Patrick Mahomes and Jalen Hurts, and Joe Burrows, Josh Allen, and Lamar Jackson. To me, those are the 5. And I don't know, Reg, quickly, do you think those are probably the top 5 in the league?
I think you nailed it. I think you nailed it. I think the only other guy who may deserve to get in there, but I think you have him in the right spot, would be Dak Prescott, because he just hadn't quite gotten to that next level. I think if he'd have played a little bit well, if his team would have gotten to the championship game, I think he probably could have made an argument for him. But you're right, Mahomes, yes, Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, and remember, when you're talking about the difference from an elite quarterback and what I call a guy that's a winner that you're going to be able to win with, it's minute, because we're talking about the greatest quarterbacks and the greatest athletes in the world. So I have another category where I call them winners. And I've got Justin Hebert, Trevor Lawrence, Kirk Cousins, and Dak Prescott in that.
Yep.
And, those are guys that they may turn into elite quarterbacks. Most of them are young. Cousins isn't, and Dak isn't. But, Trevor and Justin, they could easily and arguably be an elite quarterback. And maybe next year we'll be saying that they are an elite quarterback. Then so you got 4 there. There's 9. Then you've got these what I call the gray hairs that you can win with now. I'm a gray hair, but you can't win with me. I can't throw the ball 15 yards. But these are guys that probably 2 of the 3 are definitely going to the Hall of Fame, and that's Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, and Matthew Stafford. And Stafford maybe shouldn't be considered a gray hair, but he's getting up there. Yeah. And so those are givens. But if you're looking long term, you're thinking as a coach or a general manager, we've got to have plans, because Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers and Matthew Stafford, they're not going to be playing like 6 years from now. They're not going to be playing probably 3 years from now.
That's correct.
Yeah. You think we need to add anybody else in that gray hair?
I mean, there's all these reports out there that Brady's on the move. I mean, the whole thing about, I had a guy on a show earlier this week about how, the moving van is backed up to Brady's house, and he's moving, and then there's talk that Gronk's coming out of retirement, is going to play with Gronk, going to play with Brady again wherever. Aaron Rodgers, supposedly, according to Adam Schefter, is on the move. He's going to part. The Packers are going to part ways with him via trade or whatever. And Matt Stafford's already said he's coming back. He wants to come back and play for the Rams. So I think your list right now, the first three categories: elite, winner, and gray hairs. I think you got them. You got everybody where they need to be right now.
Yes. Well, I appreciate giving me that vote of confidence, man, because there'll be thousands or hundreds of thousands that are going to have a different opinion. And, this discussion is just getting started. We're going to hear a whole lot about it because we've got free agency coming up on the first day of the league year. This discussion will be going on all through the off season, and it's probably one of the biggest discussions. But there's some other gray hair guys out there that have declining skills, but I still think they can give you a game, some good games, and that's Andy Dalton, Matt Ryan, and Russell Wilson. And I call those the gray hair guys that we definitely have seen their skill level decline. Does that mean that you can't win games and you can't get to the playoffs, or if things fall the right way that you go to the Super Bowl? That might happen. But again, I'm talking, those 9 teams those 9 quarterbacks that we talked about first, they're the real deal. And then, and people may not want to talk about the guys in these categories, but it's going to be a musical chairs in 10, 15 of the teams this year. It's just going to happen. There's going to be people talking about them. And Tua Tagovailoa, Justin Fields, Baker Mayfield, Jimmy G, Garoppolo, Trey Lance, and Derek Carr are the guys that I say, hey, they've got a chance. They're close, and they're good football players. Don't get me wrong. We're talking about, the absolute best and, the best in the world, but they've got a chance. Will all 6 of them next year move to the elite level or to the winner level? We don't know. If they do, we're going to be talking about the teams they're on in the playoffs. I can assure you that.
Well, all 6 of those guys have really good skill sets. I mean, Tua's got a good skill set, but he's a little guy. And he's had a number of concussions. So there's a question about his durability. Justin Fields was in his rookie season. All the things say that he's on this and he'll be better. Baker Mayfield, I think it's in between his head. Jimmy G is a proven guy, can't stay healthy, but really good player. Trey Lance, we don't know yet. Not enough sample size. Has been hurt. Derek Carr, played a long time in the league. There'll be a spot for him to play quarterback this year. Absolutely.
Yeah, and where does he end up? Who knows? And then you got guys that I think are placeholders that you can plug in, and you hope that, a young guy develops, or you've got to get somebody that in your team and in your system. And these placeholder guys, I think, are guys like Ryan Tannehill, Geno Smith, Jared Goff, and Jameis Winston. I think they're the placeholder guy that can come in, and he may give you a year or two. But look, what you want to do is you want to do what the Bengals did. Draft a guy like Joe Burrows, win Absolutely. While he's on his first contract, so that you can pay other guys. Because if you got to have, when you get a guy on a second contract, it's hard to put the pieces to the puzzle together, Reg, because of the money, because of the cap.
Because of the cap. The other thing is, the GM for the Seahawks said this week that they want Geno back. He might just be posturing, but just to sort of keep the price down. But he said publicly that he want him back, and the Lions have said that they want Jared Goff back. Now, I think that the guy on this particular list is Jameis Winston. I don't think anybody knows where he is. I mean, he told everybody in the media that he was healthy and he could have played this year. And but Dennis Allen in New Orleans decided he wanted to go with Andy Dalton for the majority of the season. There's a lot of question marks and concern about that. It'll be interesting to where Jameis lines up. Jameis was the number 1 pick in the draft.
Yeah. Well, I know we're about to run out of time, so let me give these real quick, and because Reggie, we're going to be talking about these dudes
all off season
until some of these guys are under contract, and we'll talk about which ones are free agents, which ones are trade options. So I'm concerned about these 4. I'm concerned about Daniel Jones. I'm not sold on Daniel Jones. I'm not sure where we are with Deshaun Watson, having not played for a couple years. We don't know what he's capable of doing. Mac Jones is not, and maybe in the coaching situation there in New England. And then Kyler Murray. I'm just concerned about these 4 guys, whether they, can rise to the elite and the winner level on this list. But then, Reg, if you got a comment, make it quick, buddy. But
go ahead. I'm listening. I want you to finish.
So then I've got 13 guys that I just think you can't win with. And no disrespect, when you start talking about guys that are quarterbacks in the NFL, it's an elite club. It might be the most elite club there is in all of sports. But I think this is tough. Can you win a Super Bowl with Sam Darnold? Can you win a Super Bowl with Marcus Mariota or Derek Ritter, Carson Wentz, Taylor Weinke, Nick Foles, Sam Ehlinger, Davis Mills, Zach Wilson, Mike White, Teddy Bridgewater, Josh Dibbs? I mean, can you do that?
I would probably say no.
Yep. Yeah. No. And the scouts, the people that evaluate, and they probably think that way as well. We might have 1 or 2 that are out, but it's it's kind of like, some guys like blondes, some guys like brunettes.
Right, exactly.
The flavor of the day. And then there's three guys that I think there's not enough tape on yet, and that's Brock Purdy, Josh Pickett, and Malik Willis. Of those three, Brock has probably had the best career so far in his limited amount of tape. But Josh Pickett's coming, and Mike Tomlin's going to make sure that he's going to be successful, I think.
Right.
He's a defensive coach, but he sure has done a good job finding a quarterback and keeping a quarterback.
Coach, like we talked about, this list is it's just a baseline for what's going to take place, and I really do believe we're going to have a whole lot of discussion about who plays where, musical chairs, roster, cap casualty. This discussion's ongoing, obviously, but like you mentioned, the next 2 weeks, our complete focus will be on the two teams that are going to meet up at Super Bowl 57 in Glendale, Arizona.
Yeah, I would say you're right, but let's not forget there's one thing that we haven't discussed either, and that's the coaching searches that are going on. There's been a lot of news that has gone. There's water under the bridge, but there's not been a whole lot of decisions been made. Just the one there with Frank Reich, but we're in Carolina. But we'll probably get a chance next week to talk a little bit, and hopefully we'll have some more clarity in terms of who's going to be the head coaches at the four teams right now that still don't have head coaches. But Reg, we'll be Super Bowling it for sure, man. We'll be rolling them pins.
Hey, I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to the discussion next couple of weeks, and look forward to chopping it up with you, man. We'll look forward to it. We'll get on it.
All right, you guys have a great week, and hopefully we'll get an opportunity to take a breath for the next couple of days and not have to be watching all about the NFL. We get a chance to hit that golf ball. I'm gonna go chase it, Reg. Just so you know.
I'm going later today too. Have a good one, man. See you.
All right, bud. Okay. Bye.